Good afternoon. I'm Al McFarlane. Welcome to Conversations with Al McFarlane. Today is Monday, June 13th, 2020. Today we continue our neighborhood conversations. I call this governance at the neighborhood level. We do that because we're connecting with members of neighborhood organizations. Our principal partner, the Hawthorne Neighborhood Council, my co-conspirator here, conspirators, Diana Hawkins and Dee Phillips. We're doing a lot of great work by convening the community weekly and inviting people from throughout Twin Cities and from other places too to talk about things that we're passionate about, things we're concerned about, solutions that we bring to the community. And those solutions come simply from us being together, being with each other and talking about what's on our minds. Well, today I've got a great program. I want to begin by introducing and inviting to the program Don Samuels. Don Samuels is the former member of the Minneapolis City Council, former member of the Minneapolis School Board, as a matter of fact. And now, among other things, he's a candidate for U.S. Congress looking to be elected to the seat representing District 5, which is primarily Minneapolis in the U.S. House of Representatives. Don, good afternoon. How you doing? Good to see you, man.
Good afternoon, Al. It's great to be on your show. I've been looking forward to it.
Well, I've been looking forward to it as well. And I'm hoping and expecting that this won't be the last time. In fact, Don, what I'll be doing between now and the election in November is almost every Monday inviting candidates to show up without announcement, without plan. Just show up, even if they spend a minute or two or five. My commitment is to bring the candidates' voices and their ideas and interests forward into a group of community people that want to know and that are earnest about making our community better. So, Don, you are invited. Consider this a standing invitation. Come back as often as you want. I've asked other candidates to do the same. And my intent is that all of us have to pay attention to the voters. And our goal is to bring the voters' interest and voices forward. Let's go with Don Samuels 101. We haven't talked personally in a long, long time, but I always love listening to you. Tell people that don't know you yet your background, your story, and in the process, talk about what you have done in the realm of elective politics and service of community, and why you've made the decision to seek this U.S. congressional seat.
Thank you, Al. Well, for those who don't know me, I'm a family man. Sandra, my wife, and I have raised three incredible girls here in North Minneapolis in the Jordan neighborhood. And I made a pledge in college to always live in a challenged community where I could most give back and where the community had the biggest upside. And so we've lived here. I actually had a son prior to from a previous marriage, and launched him before Sandra and I got married. So together we have a combined family of four kids. I'm a community leader. I uh, After we moved in, a bullet came through our baby's designated window and lodged on the wall above where the crib was going to be. And we set about organizing immediately. And so we met in our living room with our neighbors every once a month, and we transformed our block and then the wider community quite a bit. And my neighbors asked me to run for office. So I served 3 terms on the Minneapolis City Council, 1 term on the Minneapolis School Board. I ran citywide, and now I serve on microgrants as CEO, where we give small grants to low-income folks starting a business. We also started the Lights On program, where after Philando Castile was killed. So now in the entire state, when you get pulled over by a cop for a broken light or a sheriff deputy, instead of a ticket or a confrontation, you get a voucher to fix that for free, up to $250. And that's now in 14 other states. I raise all the money for that, and so very successful program. So I'm running because I believe that we need a change. I'm a Democrat, always been a Democrat, and I actually have a lot in common with my Democratic um, opponent, Congresswoman Omar. And we all believe in the basic civil democratic platforms of civil rights, voting rights, LGBTQ rights, a woman's right to choose. We believe in the science of climate change and universal health care, etc. But we differ on some basic things, and then on our style and our leadership capacity. Regarding our differences, of course, we differed very greatly on the policing issue over the last couple of years, where she wanted the police to be MPD to be abolished and defunded, and I, of course, wanted it to be transformed and to not aggravate the criminal community by incentivizing violence with careless language. And she also, of course, deferred with the party on many issues, but we'll go through that hopefully at another question. She's kind of staked out a contrarian view for a position for herself. I'm a much more of a collaborator. I did that on the council and on the school board. And I think we need collaboration in a highly divisive time.
I looked at your website, Don. You've got some statements. I'm going to sort of let you walk through some of the statements you've made, because to give our viewers and listeners an idea of your positions and your approach to problem solving. And one, you made a statement in last month on the anniversary of George Floyd's murder. What comes to mind as you think about George Floyd's murder? And before you answer, I just remember an interview I did with your wife. Way back years ago for KFAI about a kid that got killed on Broadway, I think in Fremont, and she was passionate. So I know that your family has been on point, and you've done the vigils over your tenure as a sitting member of Minneapolis City Council. You sort of built a brand out of going to the corner where a life was taken or lost. And so when you reflect on George Floyd, the challenges in the community and the challenges between community and law enforcement, what thoughts come to mind?
Well, it comes to mind how complex the issue of safety for African Americans has been. We have been unsafe from rogue cops and from rogue neighbors, and it's very complicated. And the vulnerability of our position in society could never be more clear when the combination of the hideous torture and murder of George Floyd was then followed up by violence in the streets that resulted in 85% of all shootings uh, being uh, targeting African Americans, and the victims of 85% of the homicides being African American. So it's the African American community has borne the weight and burden of violence, whether it be institutionalized or community. And that is the complexity of the situation we have. And it's very painful, as you said, Al. I was on a corner when people were shot, sometimes by the police, sometimes community members and even leaders questioned why I would be out there standing when the police killed a bad guy or when a bad guy killed a bad guy. But I believe that all life is precious, and that we need to honor all life. And when we do not honor all life, then we send a message to the police, and we send a message to our neighbors that they can take those lives with impunity. And so also policymakers then must be careful in the language they use and the policies they propose, that it doesn't put the most vulnerable community in the United States of America at further risk. And I believe that's what the mistake that Congresswoman Omar made in her position on the violence and the policing over the last couple of years. And it's one of the major reasons I've stepped in to be a more sensible voice.
So let's go down that path a little further. Do more to draw out the distinction between yourself and Ilhan Omar. Your sense is what? How do you define the Don Samuels position on police accountability, on police resources? How does that work?
Yeah, well,
On the role of police and law enforcement, and yeah, go ahead. Hello to Sandra there. Hey, Sandra.
Hey, Al.
How you doing?
I'm good, thank you.
Sorry about that,
Sorry,
Al. We're trying to keep a puppy trapped in a room, and so can't open certain doors. Sorry about that.
Not a problem.
Yeah, could you repeat the question, Al?
Well, just draw a further distinction between your approach, your attitude, or your idea of how justice can prevail, how safety can prevail, how the administration of public safety can be done properly, and how do we make what we all do stand the test of accountability, of transparency? Because I mean, all the problems have to do with, in part, from my point of view, Don Samuels, a presumption that those who are sworn to provide order and peace, that they do that. But the evidence is that some don't.
Right.
And the ones that don't do it with impunity.
Right.
And no matter, and I think you're saying this, what their particular individual failures are, and no matter what the institutional shortcomings are, as citizens, we still have to have a internal moral guide that demonstrates what justice is and that expects accountability of ourselves and of those we elect in institutions of service as well. So where are the breakdowns, and how do you see us getting to that without radical, significant changing, quote unquote, defunding or dismantling what exists already? So I'm over paraphrasing, but you get the gist of the conversation.
I got the gist. So I believe that we know where the pinch points are, where things fall apart. Things fall apart, for instance, in the recruiting. We are not recruiting intensely enough within the community. And so that now 95% of the cops live in the suburbs. Secondly, we're not recruiting for psychological health sufficiently. And so my understanding is that several police officers say that Derek Chauvin demonstrated a psychological profile that should have banned him from even becoming a cop. So we need to hire with good psychological standards. Then once cops are hired, the training has to include protecting and serving versus warrior training, super aggressiveness and paranoia on the part of police. And then once they get on the streets, this training has to be affirmed by responsible and by appropriately promoted leaders who will then include in their supervision of the new cops the proper attitudes. Then every cop on the street needs to feel safe that they can, in the case, say, of Derek Chauvin, pull that guy off of somebody's neck if he's doing the wrong thing with his camera on so that he can prove to the chief and everybody else that he did the right thing. And then that guy needs to be protected. And when that person who defies the rules, violates the rules, is disciplined by the chief, then it should not be arbitrated back in. Neither should the discipline be overturned. The firing should stick. And then the community needs to have strong oversight and have the capacity to make decisions that stick. And then we need constant reporting on a periodic basis to show what the improvements are over time. If we do those things, with good standards, we can improve policing.
How do we improve at the same time the community, our role, our part? And that means the veering towards lawlessness of certain of our young, of certain members. I mean, how do we address that simultaneously without saying if we support the police, we have to abandon or put in an enemy category those neighbors, those children of our friends who are bad actors at the moment? How do we do that?
Yeah, well, Al, as you said, I held vigils every time someone was killed on the north side. I went to the place where they died, sometimes blood still on the staining the sidewalk, stayed there from morning till night, no matter what the temperature was. And that is true. It was not a person died under my watch during that time without that response. And Al, I'm going to get a plug here to make sure my computer doesn't die.
Sure. Yeah.
But, and so on the table. Sorry about that.
Not a problem.
And so, so the reason I did that, Al, and it's related to the reason why Sandra and I live here, which is to add value to the lives of people who think their lives are not valued. To add value by being present and not avoiding relationships with people who we consider lower income or lower resourced, and also to be present in the most devastating of situations, like the loss of life, to demonstrate that we care about people. The community has become too fractured and too divided along class lines. I mean, a politician it's not a policy issue, but I can tell you, as congressperson, I will be living in the same house I lived in for 24 years and raised 3 girls. And whatever value the presence of a congressperson adds to the block on which he or she lives will be done in the Jordan neighborhood. And so we have to, as a community, step in, right? Sandra and I started the Power to the Parents broadcast, which was live streamed on Facebook and on broadcast on KMOJ, because we know that the first 1,000 days of a child's life are the most important. And so the community needs to get that information and to learn the kind of actions they can take to raise a child to be successful, to be happy, and to be have good self-esteem so they can have a successful life. There are things the community can do. And of course, we have to hold the systems accountable, like the school system and the child care system and the systems that interact with our children to make sure that they're treated decently and well. You can't be confident or have a good future without a gift of adult attention and care in your life, especially at a young age.
How would you describe the sense of class stratification in our community?
Yes, it's unfortunate that we spent so much time in cordoned off from progress and opportunity in the society, that when the opportunity came, we didn't realize the price that would be paid when all those who could leave left, and people became isolated, as unlike what happened in the years before, where we lived in closer proximity and the models were all around, and if you did something down the street, your parents would know about it by the time you got home. That familiarity has been the fabric of that familiarity has been removed with constant mobility, and the proximity to people who held the standards of the community high has been removed. The role modeling is gone. The service of the kid across the street is gone. So, without, promoting myself, and, I noticed a young man across the street from our house who showed a lot of promise, but in very difficult situation. And we invited his mom to let him live with us while we sent him to De La Salle for 4 years, and he graduated and is now was in the University of Arizona, is going to the University of Minnesota. We would never have met him if it was just driving through. And so we have been seeing the proof of that in our own lives. And in fact, I changed my job from a toy inventor designer to a city council member. And of course, Sandra changed it to running one of the most successful family intervention programs in the country, because we live here. And so proximity means a lot.
You made a statement on Ilhan Omar's opposition to the Domestic Terrorism and Prevention Act. What is that position?
Yeah, she balked at supporting that with the Democrats, and so when Nancy Pelosi was ready to put that into action, she had to find Ilhan to persuade her to take a different position on that.
Give our viewers a summary of the act and where Ilhan, from your point of view, incorrectly positioned herself.
Yeah,
how
well,
you differ.
Yeah, the act was going to declare that domestic hate crimes could be defined as terrorism, especially mass murders, and we know that the research shows that the greatest threat to the United States is domestic terror, hate groups, and white supremacy groups. But Ilhan was afraid that this would impact the Somali community, and so she voted. She didn't go along with the decision to declare it domestic terrorism. Now, one of the challenges that Representative Ilhan has is the ability to hold two difficult positions in her mind and to make the least difficult ones. She tends to be a perfectionist and an idealist, and so she can't compromise very well. And so she does really well on consensus issues where there's a movement or a motion or a democratic position on things. But when it comes to something new where a tough decision has to be made, she sometimes leaves the room, takes a no vote, abstains, or disagrees. And so in this case, she could not see her way to that domestic terrorism was such a big problem that she might negotiate some ways to make sure that the certain communities were not targeted. She just disagreed with it and wouldn't take a vote.
And okay, great. Talk about the mass shootings in Uvalde recently, and also the ones in New York. What about our country and violence and our country's attitude? It seems like we're becoming more and more divided over, the far right sentiment that it's not the guns, it's the people. The people need their guns, Second Amendment right, and then a progressive ideology that says we need to have sensible rules and regulations around armament, around guns. Discuss that. What's your discussion? How do you approach that, and how do you do that in the light of what happened in Buffalo and Uvalde and more?
Well, Al, you probably know that over 80% of the American community thinks that we should have sensible gun laws, and that we don't need weapons of war in domestic possessions. And so the people, the community wants these changes. It's the process of electing politicians on the right of the aisle makes candidates vulnerable to money at that early stage of the process, whether it be the caucuses or the primary. That money can make a big difference, and so the folks on the right are afraid. But the people want change, and so what we need is for the politicians to get some courage. And actually, the Democrats were also not courageous on this issue for decades. And finally, we are finding our policymakers are finding that they can make a strong stand against uh, um, war, weapons of war, and for red flag laws, etc., and still get elected. The Republicans haven't discovered that yet because they haven't had the courage to take the risk.
What do you think the Supreme Court discussion of uh, uh, potentially overturning Roe v. Wade, what impact will that have on your election, on the elections in general, coming up in November?
Yeah, this is going to be a decider between the right and the left because, the way I see it, the Democrats have their feet on the gas, their foot on the gas, in the change towards a better country, and the Republicans have their foot on the brakes. And you need a brake and a gas pedal in a car, but when the brake becomes the dominant uh, response to change, then we are sometimes going to start going backwards. And here's a case in point. And I am for Roe versus Wade, for a woman's right to choose. I think, here again, most Americans, over 70%, believe a woman should have the right to make that decision, but it's a political football. And I'm hoping that a few Republicans will join us Democrats in the House and make this a woman's right to choose law.
Minnesota's Department of Human Rights issued I call it, damning report on the lack of accountability and responsibility, or stated more affirmatively, on the failure of the Minneapolis City Council and Police Department in enacting its oversight and control of the Minneapolis Police Department. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Well, let me say that the police department has been for centuries, really, the enforcers of inequity. And as the society has changed, the police department's policies and their contract with the cities across the country have enshrined those old practices into policy, and the policies haven't changed. And so things need to catch up now with the 21st century. And I think the public outrage and the dramatic public national response to George Floyd's death and to police shootings after, show that the public is resoundingly saying, white and black and people of all colors, that it is time for the police departments across the country to catch up with the rest of the country, and those retrograde policies that have been enshrined into contracts with unions need to be upgraded and brought into the 21st century, so that when chiefs fire someone, the firing can stick and the person doesn't walk back into the chief's face the next day after arbitration. That is deflating to any leader. If you fire someone and they show back up on the job in a very hierarchical structure, no less. And so there are the culture on the street is a vessel for the old practices, and also the protections negotiated by the unions over the years allow those behaviors to be excused and in fact rewarded. And that's why Derek Chauvin could have stared in that camera so passively and defiantly, knowing that everything that was in place was for his protection. So the rules need to change. The practices and culture on the streets need to change.
Don, let me have you close by acknowledging you still have a Jamaican accent. Talk a little bit about your upbringing, and in that spirit, the the changing nature, the demographics, not only in the country but certainly in Minnesota, with people from different parts of the world being present and inserting themselves into the local political and cultural environment. Talk about Jamaica, your upbringing. You got about a minute to do it in, though.
Well, Al, I blame you for that. You got me excited, and my accent comes out when I'm a little bit excited. But yeah, I grew up in Jamaica. My dad was a Pentecostal preacher. My mom was a seamstress for the neighborhood. We grew up in a low-income community, and our church was full of low-income folks, and we were also low-income. I walked back and forth from my low-income community to a school where I got a scholarship to um, for middle and high school every day for all of my childhood. And so I developed a very strong sense of the inequity, walking from my poor community into a middle upper class school every day where I couldn't afford the sneakers for gym or the track clothes or the books and getting punished for that. And so I have a deep sense of commitment to not join that system that is inequitable, unfair, and unjust. And that's why I made the pledge to live where we live now for 25 years, because this is where folks who grew up like me still live. And I always wish that I had a rich uncle and that someone was there for me when I didn't have the resources for school, etc. So I'm going to be that person here in this community. I'm not rich, but I have resources and connections. And when I get to Congress, I'm going to be even more connected to serve this community from the position of, they say every point of view is a view from a point. And I'm going to be leading in Congress from my point of view as a resident of the Jordan neighborhood in North Minneapolis, in the city of Minneapolis, in the 5th District.
Don Samuels, thank you. Take care. Listen, you are invited to come back every Monday as often as you wish. Want to hear your voice, and I'll keep thinking of challenging questions as we go on the path to the election this fall. Take care, my friend.
Thank you, Al. Thank you for the time.
Okay, take care. I'm Al McFarlane. This is Conversations with Al McFarlane. Thanks to Don Samuels for being here. Don, hang out as long as you wish. It's open architecture here. I want to introduce Kwesi Booker, and Kwesi is new to the Twin Cities. He's leading an initiative at Children and Family Services at Hennepin Health. And the question is, what is the county's responsibility enacted through the Children and Family Services team? So Kwesi, first of all, welcome to Conversations with Al McFarlane. Welcome to the community. Describe your job, your mission, the county's work in the area of family children services.
Well, thank you for having us here. My team and I very happy to be here to have this conversation with you and your audience. As an agency, our mission and goal is to protect the children of Hennepin County and make sure that they're in safe and nurturing environments. So we continue to work diligently with how we engage the community, how we're building trust with our community providers and our community to really ensure that our children are safe. The when we're coming in, we're minimizing trauma and not causing additional harm to families. So that's our goal and purpose. Part of what we've done as a county is we've set up a coordination center to help when we do have to bring a child into care. We know it's very traumatizing. So we've set up a coordination center to assist us with minimizing trauma to the child. And I have my colleague here, Suzanne and Maddie, to talk to us a little bit about the inner workings of the coordination center.
Suzanne, Maddie, good afternoon. How are you both?
Hi, Al. Great. How are you?
I'm well. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being patient as well. Talk about what your particular job is, how the three of you form team and between and among you, you are representing and serving those of us who are residents and families in the county.
So Maddie is here with me, and she's part of our placement coordination team. And so she's going to share with us a little bit about what things looked like before and the transition that we've been under with the new coordination center and services. We've got two teams, like I said, placement coordination, and another team that I'll talk about a little bit later called the placement support team. But the coordination center is new, about 1.5 years now. And we are really working to change the way that we approach things when kids need to be brought into what we call out-of-home placement. So Maddie, if you're okay with sharing a little bit about how things used to be, and then Al, if you're okay with that, we'll talk a little bit about how that's different.
Yep.
Thanks for having us, Al. It's fun to be here. So I joined the county 1.5 years ago when the coordination center opened, but previously to that, I was at St. Joseph's Home for Children for a little over 5 years. And as people may or may not know, St. Joe's used to be where all children in Hennepin County came to if they were needing emergent out-of-home placement. Hennepin County contracted with Catholic Charities since the early 70s to provide that care. And so when you think about that, we really had one model of how we were taking kids into out-of-home placement that was operating for almost 50 years pre-COVID. And then St. Joe's did close in 2020, and now we have the coordination center, which is new and under Hennepin. I will say in the 5 years that I worked at St. Joe's, the county already had been working on revision and restructuring how we were doing out-of-home placement. I mean, the first year I was there, it was very common for kids to just arrive in squad cars, very little information known about them and the family, and kind of this knee-jerk response of let's put them with a emergency foster provider and then work our way back and try to find a different match or the next option. What we were seeing by the end was that number going down significantly because placement workers were on scene at the crisis, talking to the primary caregiver, asking who was available as a relative or maybe a more non-traditional kin placement like a teacher or a sport coach. And then also when they were coming through St. Joe's, we were trying to place with those shelter providers. And now Suzanne and I will talk more about how we're working just to have a child with one foster parent for the duration of their out-of-home stay.
Go ahead, Suzanne.
Okay. So really above all, what's changed is now that we are we are definitely being more child-centered and family-centered in what we do. And above all, it's reducing the number of transitions. So you heard Maddie talk about kids having to go to St. Joe's first and then possibly a shelter foster home before we found a long-term placement for them. Now how we're looking at things is, number one, we're looking to see if there's a relative or a kin who will take the child. That's our priority. And we actually have about 70, first of all, overall, the number of kids coming into out-of-home placement has been reduced. And now of those, about 70% are able to go and stay with a relative or a kin. So the biggest change is what we're calling the one placement model. And that is where we have eliminated those extra transitions or additional transitions that kids need to experience. So children are coming either right from their home to a relative's home or to a foster provider. So that's one of the biggest differences that we're now doing with the coordination center.
So what was the learning that has created this shift in awareness? From the outsider's point of view, the reporter's point of view, has been and remains considerable anguish isn't the word, but concern about whether. So I'm going to use some rough language here. So just take it for what it's worth. It's almost as if there's a sense that Black children and children of color were being trafficked. That's the rough language I'm talking about. Trafficked, taken out of situations that they needed to come out of because they were vulnerable and they were in vulnerable circumstances, but too easily placed in white homes, and almost never placed in homes with people from the same culture or community. And certainly there were perceived to be barriers to family members providing the service of supporting children that were vulnerable. And that when Black people stepped up, the question was, oh, you're just gaming the system. You want us to pay you for taking care of your cousin. And that's what y'all do all the time. Why do you want to get paid for it now? But not a question of why we pay an exorbitant amount to white families in suburbs to take care of Black children who at some point in time can change their mind and say, you know what, I'm tired of doing this. You take them back. That's a lot, but I know you've heard it before. So
Right.
talk about that whole process and how we have changed and how we've grown and matured through that, I'd say possibly misinformed public sentiment. Suzanne, Kwesi, either one of you, all of
Yeah.
you.
So I'll take this one. So I think disproportionately, we agree. Disproportionately, a lot of children of color, Black children, are represented in our child welfare system, and it starts all the way from the calls we receive, all the way through out-of-home placement and reunification. So yes, definitely admitting that and saying yes, it's not only a problem here in Hennepin, but it's all across the country.
Mhm.
But in Hennepin, we have 40% of our children placed with with kinship families, where we're fully providing support for the families. Also, I'm not sure if you're aware, but 95% of the calls that we do receive in Hennepin County, we don't bring children into care. We either assess the family, close the case out, or we assess the family and provide services. Of those 5% of cases that you mentioned where we are bringing the children into care, our focus now in Hennepin is placing that child with kin, not looking at the amount of money we're paying for kin to support that child, but making sure kin has the right supports, whether they need a fire extinguisher, whatever they need to get them licensed so that we can fully support them and pay them to take care of their youth. We understand that there's a cost associated with a child, the trauma to a child, and if we can minimize that by supporting that family, by making sure that family has the necessary resources to care for that child, we're going above and beyond to make sure that happens. We're going above and beyond to make sure that all our kin providers are licensed, so that they're able to take full advantage of all the benefits that are coming to any foster parent that has a child. So that's our goal. That's our focus. We also are very much understand the trust of the community and how they feel about us, and we're working very hard. We've hired Cathy Spann as a community engagement coordinator. She's an executive level leader within our organization, and she is very well, as I'm sure you are well aware of her resume, and she is working with us to build back our trust in our community, to make sure that our community understands that when we become involved, we're there to help and not to hurt. Whether that be an investigation and assessment, or supporting kin or supporting families. We want to make sure that we are minimizing trauma to as much as possible as we engage and provide support to our families.
Well, Cathy Spann's the right person. She's one of our allies and organizers in the community and has a stellar connection. And I think that's great that you're doing that. And so, but you acknowledge, Brother Booker, that this conversation has existed in the community. And so I'd like to have a sense of how the department has pivoted to the direction that you're talking about now, because I think what you're saying is really on point and correct. And I think it's also critically important that you're places like you are right now with me, talking to communicators to help build public knowledge and public awareness, about the change in practice and philosophy and in policy. I think that's a wonderful thing, and thank you for doing that and for being here. And so what were the things that made the department, that made not so much your department, but the industry to look differently at how we adjudicate or execute our mission? What do you think?
Well, racism is built into our system, and we have the first thing that we needed to do was acknowledge it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think once we've acknowledged it, we begin to address it. We're looking at the data, and the data clearly shows where the disproportionality is occurring, and making sure we're taking steps on each step of the way to address those disproportionalities. So for us in Hennepin, our pain points are the number of calls we received on families of color. So we're looking at what data we can share with our providers, with our mandated reporters to let them know the number of calls we receive from them on families, and how that data breaks down in terms of race. We also know a pain point is the number of children coming into out of home placement. And our goal here is to have family group decision making meetings with families so that they can have a voice, and community so they can have a voice in terms of what's best, what they can do to protect their families, and what they can do to protect their children as we engage with each other. In terms of our team, we're looking at our culture in terms of how do we meet families where they are, how do we serve them where they are, and get them to where they need to be to provide a safe and nurturing environment for the children involved in their families. So those are some of the things that we are currently doing and working on within Hennepin County to make sure that, you know, the disproportionality in our data and our numbers are significantly being decreased.
I have your website up on share right now, and you might talk about what I'm looking at now, what we're looking at, on what page we're looking at now, about the data. And can you see it?
Is it possible you can make it a little bigger?
I'm not sure that I know how to do that. Let's see. Is that any bigger?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, this one is, this chart is percentage of adoptions to relatives by race and ethnicity. And it shows a significant increase in percentage-wise from 2017 to 2020. You know, so yeah, what you're saying is evidenced in the data here. This is a great document, by the way, and people can go online to Hennepin County to get details. It's the 2020 annual report of Children and Family Services, but to get details about the outcomes that you guys are producing and where you plan to go, where you will be going with that. How can families be supportive of this work? Let me ask maybe Maddie and Suzanne to address that. How do you want the community to wrap itself around and support the work that you're doing?
I think there's several ways. First of all is, you know, if by chance you have a relative who is engaged or has to work with child protection, and we are looking for a relative or family member to help care for that child, to be available, and we will support you in every step of the way, but be available to help care for a relative, whether it be a grandchild, a niece, nephew, a cousin, and we can help provide a lot of supports in doing that. We know that a lot of times when kids are placed with relatives, it's not a planned situation. A lot of times it's an emergency. So we're prepared to come in and walk alongside the family and provide immediate things that the family might need, whether it be diapers, formula, wipes, a pack and play. We can help people get all the items that they need to be able to take care of the children, and along with providing support, you know, through the licensing process, because once a family member decides to help care for a child, then there is a process to go through for ongoing. A lot of other things that we're doing with the placement support team, and we know that's an area we want to grow in, is how can we better support relative and kin placements. We are providing what we call comfort calls and icebreaker meetings. So right away, setting up a co-parenting situation, whether that is a relative placement or a non-relative placement, that we know that we want to make that connection between the foster provider and the birth family right away. And that's, I think, a big shift in our practice, where there used to not be that communication. Now it's more looking like co-parenting and partnering. The other way the community can step up is we have a great need for non-relative providers as well. So when there's a situation where we're not able to find a relative, we really want to be able to have children go to what we're considering being the best match, where we understand the connections that the child has in the community, faith community, cultural connections, things like that. And we need to have people step up who are from that child's community, if they're not a relative, and be able to provide that foster care.
I think too, just to add to that, when we're talking to the community, we're trying to go to that foster providers are directly engaged with the parents or primary caregivers, because the goal is ultimately reunification for that family group. And so we are training our foster providers now to be more of a direct resource to the parents. Like Suzanne was talking about, those icebreaker meetings or comfort calls. There's some great stories that have already occurred where within the 24 hours, parents are speaking with foster providers to provide knowledge that they're experts on, which is their own children. And that foster provider can move forward with them to provide, a reduction in the trauma that occurs going into non-relative or even relative placement. Just this week, we had a family who needed to come into out-of-home care in an emergency. And the mother was the one who said, can they go back to where they were before for 500 days? And those providers had kept in touch with mom. They had gone to barbecues with mom. They are not a relative, but those children know that foster parent. And in that emergency, the placing worker was able to place them with her. And so mom feels comfortable. Mom knows where her child is. The children know the provider. And that placing worker also maintain those relationships. So we're really trying to focus more on the rapport and maintaining it for the longevity in the best interest of the child and the family, rather than what was previously done, which is here's your first placement and perhaps you're on to the next and the next and the next. We don't want to see that continue moving forward.
The state has been looking at, other states have as well, family preservation legislation, particularly focused on indigenous populations, indigenous or American Indian nations. But that question has always been brought forward as well by the African American community about out-of-home placement for Black families. And I see that this is being addressed by you presently. I think what is missing, and you're doing it now, is telling that story, creating awareness of this way of connectedness. It's not a question of separation and keeping or standing between the birth parents or the family and a process that promises to remold or reshape a human being into something that he or she is not, but rather it's a process now of acknowledging the innate dignity, humanity, and the value therein, and creating a process that does not diminish or devalue that as the child is placed in an environment that is not violent or that is supportive, but it doesn't mean stripping away the child's identity. We're going to move on in a couple of seconds. My friend here is to talk about Juneteenth. Michelle, I hope that you all have a booth at the Juneteenth event or going to be involved in using that and other resources to communicate about your work at Family and Children's Services. But before I do, Kwesi, accent, Jamaican or maybe Ghanaian? I'm trying to guess. The Kwesi name is Ghanaian maybe, but you sound like a Jamaican a little bit, but maybe not.
No, I was actually born in Guyana, and I grew up in Grenada. So I consider myself West Indian. Yes.
And then Suzanne, I was expecting a Ugandan or Ghanaian when I saw your name, and you still could be a Ghanaian. What's the story on your name?
Well, obviously, Kpowulu is my married name, and it's West African. It's a Liberian name.
Okay, a beautiful name. And Maddie, yeah, what's your cultural source? What do you bring in culture to the work that you do? And that's the reason I'm asking the question. I think that who we are and what we've been raised to be informs how we interact with each other in the world. And I think it's important to acknowledge that. So in that spirit, Maddie, tell me about you.
Yeah, I mean, my culture is Germanic and English, and I know you have to do a lot of work looking inside yourself and acknowledging your biases and calling things out directly as a white woman who's heterosexual doing this work, but still wanting to be an advocate for the community and have the common collective goal of keeping children safe, supporting families, and being knowledgeable about what is going on in our community. Always. I've born and raised in Southwest Minneapolis, and so I do feel really connected to this community, but always learning, continuing engagement, and being open-minded to what I don't know.
What's the derivation of your name, Alcon? I haven't seen that name before.
I think it's German. That would
Is
be
it?
a question for my dad. Might have to go back to that, Al.
Okay. Michelle, talk about what's happening in the next few minutes at Juneteenth. This we can invite both our panelists and participants, but also the community to support and show up and be part of the wonderful West Broadway Juneteenth work that you're organizing.
Yep, starting at 8 o'clock, we're going to have Jarrell Perry, who ran for mayor, is going to be hosting a Father's Day, Fathers in Solidarity rally and brunch, bringing back together, having some of the most prominent leaders speak, including Don Samuels, as well as Representative John Thompson, Bobby Joe Champion, Bishop Howe, Brian Hearn, and a few others. And so I don't have a lot of time, but you guys can definitely go to the website, juneteenthminnesota.com, take a look at what we have. We've got a mini carnival for the kids. Really excited about that because we are doing something new that I've never seen at an event before, where we're going to have a do-it-yourself mini carnival kind of treats where the kids can cook like their own cotton
Wow.
candy, their mini donuts, hot dogs, that sort of thing. We've got a lot of games, a lot of gifts to give out. We've got a art competition where they can, paint and draw or do whatever on easels. We've got a lot of other organizations that are going to have exhibits there. So the Loppet Foundation is going to be having some activities for the kids, as well as Minnesota STEM Project with drones and robotics. We've got a fashion show, which a few of our BOB members, which BOB stands for Black Owned Businesses. That's who we are. And we have a lot of live entertainment, a lot of live music. Music could be going on all day long. So from 8 to 6 p.m., everybody get out. Now, one of our sponsors is Metro Transit. You can go online and you can download a pass to ride the bus to the event. I know there's a lot of Juneteenth events going on in the Twin Cities, but as far as I know, we're the only one where Metro Transit is giving that honor to ride the bus wherever you are in the area to the event. So there's no excuse why you can't get out. This event is for everybody. It doesn't matter what, like Don was saying, your income. It doesn't matter your background or whatever. We want everybody to be there so we can engage. We're about Black economic development. And so this is a way for us, with a lot of the new things that are going on West Broadway, to help bring the community together so that we can, we need to have these kind of events where we
There you
all
go.
come together and just share. Yeah.
We're about out of time. I wanted my friends Diana and Dee to weigh in. Diana, Dee, any impressions, thoughts on any and all of the program today? I thought it was great to have Don on, and this interview with Kwesi and Suzanne and Maddie, I think, is superb. And of course, it's always wonderful to have Michelle on talking about Juneteenth. Diana, what are your thoughts? And Dee?
I enjoyed their conversation today, and I'm going to extend an invitation for you guys to come and present at the coalition with some charts, some slides, so we can really look into your work. And I'll be the coalition is about. Speaking of the coalition, I wanted to remind everyone that this Friday, June 17th, we will be having our meeting at 11 o'clock, and we're going to have an update on the light rail extension. So join us.
Dee, how you doing? Any thoughts, impressions?
She's muted.
You muted again. You were off for a second. There you go.
It was really interesting to hear what Don had to say and what the everyone from Hennepin County, how that's changing, and then just repeating our invitation to join us for the coalition.
Great. Kwesi, Suzanne, Maddie, any announcements you want to make? Anything you want people to pay attention to? Want to give out any contact information that people can take down if they have questions or comments or need more information?
You can reach us via our website at the Hennepin County website. But I think I want to say that We have some community engagement activities coming your way, led by Cathy Spann. So please look out for flyers and hearing that. We want to hear our community. We want to know where you stand with us and how we can continue to build trust. So look out for some flyers around our community engagement activity. We have an African American virtual community forum that's being held on June 23rd from 6 to 7:30 p.m. And if you're interested, hit our website up for the link to participate. We definitely want to hear the voice of our community as we move our work forward.
Brother Kwesi, Suzanne, Maddie, thank you so much. Michelle, thank you. Brenda, good to see you again. We'll see you again tomorrow, Brenda. We're here every day. And Diana and Dee, thank you. I'm Al McFarlane. This is Conversations with Al McFarlane. We'll see you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.